Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you this morning? Hope you're doing good. I hope you're doing well. I know that I'm doing good and I'm doing well, and I'm just so glad to be alive. I'm just so glad that we serve a God that we just got through singing about the love of God. Mikey did such a beautiful job leading that song. That's the reason why I chose it, because I knew it would get my heart going and my temperature up to preach this message today. Today we're going to talk about wisdom. Get wisdom. Wisdom. Get wisdom. What is wisdom? What is wisdom? Well, the root word for wisdom is wise. We talked about this in Sunday school class. We said everyone would like to think they are wise. Am I right about that? Do you think most people think that they're wise? I think most people think that they're pretty wise. That's some debating. We who are wise use wisdom when it comes to making good decisions, like house hunting. I mean, it takes a lot of thought going into that. That's the reason why I asked him that question. I wanted him to think, and he basically said they went through a process of thinking about it. But even though that might be the one, 10 years from now, you might be wanting to sell it. So, it takes wisdom to make good decisions. My grandpa would always tell us younger children to listen to your elders for advice, because they have lived longer and had more experiences when it comes to learning about life. And isn't that true? Isn't that true? But I think sometimes I remember when I was young, sometimes I wanted to talk more than I let them talk. But I learned if I would just let them talk, I might really learn something, And then sometimes I like to hear of what older people have went through. I love when Roy tells me something that he did in Korea, or how he kept warm. He said, because it was always cold over there, and at night he'd have to do different things to keep warm. I can't remember one thing that he told me, but he's told me at least 3 things, and I just can't remember them right now. But to listen to what they have to say is so much more. It will help you if you're young. Listen to older folks. When I used to go to inner city ministry, we had a day that we would all rotate to go to the old folks home. And I tell you, it was there that I started to realize that these people love to share their ideas, their antidotes, their advice. And sometimes they gave you good stuff. If you really listen, you would be surprised. And sometimes they tell you a good old story. I love Wednesday nights because Doug goes into these stories that and I'm like a little kid. I just get ready for it because I know it's coming. And he has good stories that he tells us. And he makes me feel like he's my pa. He's old enough to be my pa. I consider him my pa in the gospel, so that's cool. But we need to take time out to listen to older people for our own learning. It might give us a better path in life that we're seeking. It might help us with something. Michael Jordan. When Michael Jordan came out of college, he was the hottest thing since sliced bread. Everybody wanted Michael to play for them. And when Michael came out, Converse was fighting to get Michael to endorse their shoe. But so was Adidas. And Converse and Adidas were the leading shoes back then. But both of them wanted Michael, and they both offered him like $250,000. Each one of them was offering him that much money to endorse their shoes. But Michael's agent, David Falk, was working on a better deal for Michael. And Michael didn't know it. But he said, Michael, we got to fly out to Oregon. And Michael said, why are we going to Oregon? He goes, there's a new company starting called Nike. They're starting up, and they want you to endorse them. And Michael said, no, I got my mind made up. I'm going with Converse. Adidas don't know it yet, but I'm going with Converse. And David said, but Michael, you need to at least listen to what Nike has to say. He goes, no, I got my mind made up. Michael's 21 years old. He got out of college early to go to the NBA. You know what David Falk does? David Falk goes behind Michael's back and calls his mother. Calls his mother, Mrs. Jordan. And he gets her on the phone. He tells her the situation. And she goes in the room and says, Michael, you will be on the plane to go to Oregon tomorrow to see what Nike has to say. He says, but Mom, I don't want to go. I'm signing with Converse. I mean, Larry Bird's with Converse. Magic's with Converse. I mean, I want to be with those guys. And she said, Michael, you're going to listen to your mother, because you need to listen what Nike has to say. They might have a better deal than Converse and Adidas. Well, you know where this story is going, because Michael Jordan has made more money on Nike shoes than anybody else in the world. I mean, well, except for maybe the company. I don't know. I don't have the stats on that, but he's made a lot of money. I mean, he's got people under him, and he's still making money. Like LeBron's shoes, he was signed to Nike under Michael. So was Carmelo and some of those other cats. Most of those cats now, because they all looked up to Michael. So they signed with Michael. So he's making money on top of money. And Michael became a millionaire because he listened to Mom. How come we as young people don't want to listen to our parents? Why is that? Why do we think we know more than Mom? But Michael listened, and it's such a good example of listening. The definition of wisdom is the ability to make a decision based on knowledge and experience. Knowledge is the facts. Experience is the testing of the facts. And when you get those two together, you got some pretty good wisdom, I hope. I mean, when I was a little kid, my grandmother used to tell me, Charles, stay away from that stove. Charles, stay away from that stove. I got a mark right here that says I didn't listen to my grandma. But after experiencing that stove, my wisdom tells me I don't want to touch that thing again. It's hot. And that's what wisdom is. It is the ability to have the knowledge and experience, and that will give you wisdom. However, in Proverbs chapter 1, the writer there is Solomon. He wrote, and in Proverbs chapter 1, he lays out an outline of basically what Proverbs is about. And it's talking about wisdom, and it's talking about the fear of the Lord, basically. But in that first chapter, he says it is to gain wisdom and instructions for understanding words of insight, behavior that is just and right, for guidance that produces sound judgment. It's good to act off of sound judgment, isn't it? There are so many people that have messed up their life for a lapse of sound judgment. Just one little lapse of sound judgment, and their whole life can go down the path. My best friend, James Woods, I love him to this day. We were really good friends from the first to the sixth grade, but at the end of the sixth grade, we moved. And after that, me and James' lives went different paths. But his went to a different path because I played sports. I didn't mess with drugs. But somehow, James didn't mess with drugs, but somehow later on in high school, he started messing with drugs. And one night, he wanted a fix. So he went to rob 7-Eleven, and he shot a pregnant lady. And the thing of it is, he don't remember it because he was high. And he regrets it. All because of lapse of sound judgment. It is important for us to get wisdom. We need it. We need it. My mother, she went out to the skating rink, and this guy whispered something in her ear, and she liked him. She had sex the first time she met this guy and produced me, and it changed my mother's life. Lapse of sound judgment. I mean, I'm glad to be here, don't get me wrong. And I love my mother. My mother is in heaven, chilling, or in the bosom of Abraham, chilling with the most and all that. But it really changed her life. It really upset my family that my mom was 16 and then I was born. And I want to say thank you to all my uncles and aunties because they made me feel like the golden child. Trust me, I'm spoiled rotten. But I tell you, it really threw my mom for a curve because my mom had visions of going to college. and visions of getting a government job. And she still did all of that. She raised 4 of us and still did all of that. But that little lapse of time, just not, because my grandmother told her, you do not go anywhere with a man by yourself. If you don't have a sister or your cousins there, you're not to go out alone with a man by yourself. We've got to listen to wisdom. We've got to understand what sound judgment is, and we've got to get it, and we need it. And we've got to learn to use it so that we don't find ourselves in a bad place. And at the end of that, or in verse 7, Solomon says, the fear of God is the beginning of knowledge. The fear of God is the beginning of knowledge. And then he says this, but fools despise wisdom. And I've always thought, why would he put that there? But I guess it makes sense, because there are some people that's not going to believe God. They just don't. And sometimes I forget that, because I'm just doing everything I can to know more about God and to come close to God so that I can just be in his presence, because God is awesome and he is mighty. But some do despise it. To fear God is to show great respect, a great respect and reverence. We need to revere God. He is special. He is holy. He is mighty. He is wonderful. He loves us and he disciplines us. Yes, because we need it. When you really love your kids, you'll discipline so you can train them to go in the right way. And that's what God does. And some people say, well, that ain't right. You shouldn't whoop that kid. Are you kidding? My mom whooped me a lot, and that was about 10 more I should have got. We need that discipline from God to show that reverence, to revere him, or being in the awe of God. Jim Motter used to talk about the awe of God. To Jim, it was more precious than gold to have that awe for God. He knew who God was, and he understood that he needed to put everything that he had in himself and give it to God, and to have that awe of God, knowing and understanding that no one is above God. To worship and to serve and to put God first in your life. That is the fear of God. It's not that you're afraid of God. It's that you respect him so much and you revere him so much and you got him in awe that you put him first in your life. This is true wisdom. And it is good for all of us. What are the benefits of wisdom? In Proverbs 2, there are some benefits that Solomon writes in here. And one of them is success for those who are upright. The upright are the ones that are following the advice of God. You will find great success. That's a benefit of wisdom. Another benefit is it protects the way of the faithful ones. See, when you're faithful, you don't have to fear nothing. When you're faithful to God and you're doing his will to the best of your ability, you don't have to fear nothing. I love my job at UPS. I love the money that it provides. But more than that, I love the benefits that we get. If I have a surgery, all I got to do is pay $100 and they pay everything else for the rest of the year. That's pretty good benefits. I've never experienced benefits, well, except from God. But that's the best job I've ever had with benefits. It blows me away that we have. And I remember when Bruce Jenner changed to be Caitlyn. All of a sudden he wanted to be a man. And it was a big to-do. People were saying, well, why is he doing that? People say, he's just faking. People say, no, he's for real. We don't know, do we? I know. He was getting kicked off the show, so he had to come up with something to keep it exciting so he could stay on. That's pretty much what it is. That's what it boils down to. But I say that to say this. At UPS, these topics come up. And somebody asked me what I thought about Bruce Jenner. And I said, he is lost. He is lost. He's lost his mind. He's lost whatever. But he's lost. Because God made him to be a man. You can do what you want. God allows you to do what you want. If you don't do the right thing, that's on you. You're making a big mistake. You can't change what God made you to be. You can try it all you want to, but you're going to be miserable. You're not happy. And that's all I said. And don't you know, by the end of the day, I was in the office. Because I stood up for God. I was standing up for God. And I was told you can't put your religious beliefs on others. And I just said, fire me then. Because I'm always going to stand up for God. I'm not worried about this job and its great benefits because my God will take care of me. So if you're going to fire me, go ahead and do it now. If not, let me go back to work. And Scott, my boss, he looks at me, he goes, look, Bellefant, I'm on your side. I'm with you. But we don't want this kind of thing going on between workers. It creates fights. I said, well, then I beg you to get them to stop talking about the things that they talk about that irritates me. Because they talk about things that irritates me. You don't think I get upset? I don't come crying to you, do it. I said, you know what I do? I pray for them because they don't know what they're talking about. You know, that's that thing of Jesus dying on the cross and say, forgive them for they know not what they do. That's why we have to stand as Christians and be that way. We have to know who we are. But I was not scared in that office. I knew I was faithful. I knew I was doing the right thing. I knew I was standing up for God. I dared him to fire me and was not afraid. Because if I got fired, I get to go home. I was going to go home and pray and cook some breakfast and then start looking for another job because God probably already had one waiting for me anyway. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've lost a job at, when I worked at Domino's up here down the street, I've worked at that Domino's 4 different times. But you run into people who don't know how to manage their stores. And when I see the management going bad and we start losing sales, I go find another job because I don't want to be there if they're not going to run it right. I'm not worried about things like that. When I stay faithful to God, my wisdom tells me that I'm going to be all right. Stay faithful and God He will get us through. The other benefit of wisdom is it saves you from the wicked ways of men. And when I read that, I think, yeah, in my own wicked ways, because I have my own wicked ways. But wisdom will keep us from that. It saves you from the adulterous woman or from her seductive words. And women, that goes both ways because men are adulterous and seductive is just as well. But it is important for us as young people to understand that God says you're not to have sex until you're married for a reason. It's a very good reason. Number one, it cuts down on all these illegitimate children. I can't tell you how many kids in the world that don't know that. I don't know my father. I've never met my father. I pray for him all the time. I pray that he's in Christ, but I've never met him. Never seen him. And my aunt says, well, you look in the mirror, you'll see him. You look just like him. You know. So it's crazy, man. God says that for that reason. God wanted us to have a mother and a father in holy matrimony. That is the only way we should be having sex and having kids. The way God says is the best. Another thing, we wouldn't have all these diseases running around. It wouldn't be. All because of lack of sound judgment. That passion gets us in trouble. You know, we gotta keep ourselves out of situations that puts us one-on-one with men and women so that doesn't come up. We have to exercise wisdom and know what we need to do to stay out of trouble. If you don't want to get drunk, don't go to a bar. You know, it's just that simple. And Proverbs 8, he says wisdom, the benefits of wisdom, it gives you insight. It gives you counsel. It counsels you with sound judgment. Gives you power. Gives you wealth and prosperity. Now, who don't want to be wealthy and prosperous? Most of us do. But this is what wisdom will give us. And it also gives us a rich inheritance. So that's some benefits of wisdom. And there's more of them in Proverbs. You can read Proverbs and find a whole lot more in there. But then he also warns us, Solomon warns us in Proverbs against rejecting wisdom. Because he says, when you reject wisdom, I will laugh at your disaster. That's what God says. When you reject my wisdom, I will laugh at your disaster. Calamity will overtake you. Calamity are events that causes damage or ruin. Distress and trouble will overwhelm you. Distress, trouble in your life, it will overwhelm you. In Proverbs 2:28, it says, when you call out to God, he will not answer. When you're not taking God's advice, when you're not living faithful to God, and when you're doing what you want to do, and then you get into that insurmountable spot that you can't get out of, and you turn to yell for God, God is like, I don't hear you. I've been after you for years. I don't know how far that is, but I mean, it says he will not answer. It says it in the word. I believe it. Waywardness will kill them. Waywardness is following no clear principle or law. Just waywardness. You're just out there like the wild, wild west. You're just out there with no law. Complacency of fools will destroy them. And these are all warnings against wisdom, against rejecting wisdom. And I just think that's very interesting that God makes that known to us, that if you reject me, you're going to pay for it. If you reject me, you're not living wise. If you reject me, you're living foolish. Mike read for us in Job 28 that we must seek wisdom. I want to read that verse again. I'm just going to start in verse 20. Job 28, verse 20. It says, where then does wisdom come from? Where does understanding dwell? It is hidden from the eyes of every living thing, concealed even from the birds in the sky. Destruction and death say only a rumor of it has reached our ears. God understands the way to it, and he alone knows where it dwells. For he views the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens. When he established the force of the wind and the measures out of the waters, when he made the decree for the rain and the path for the thunderstorm, then we looked at wisdom and appraised it. We confirmed it. We tested it. And he said to the human race, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. And to shun evil is understanding. That's what it says in Job. And we've got to seek it. We've got to seek it. Proverbs 4, I'm not going to read that. I'll let you read it for yourself. But it says wisdom is supreme in Proverbs 4. It's supreme. It's the best pizza. You ever order supreme pizza? It's usually pepperoni, sausage, onions, green peppers, mushrooms. You can take the green peppers and mushrooms. I just give, well, never mind. But that's a deluxe pizza, you know. If you don't like it, order what you want. Build your own, you know. But the supreme pizza is supposed to be the best. The supreme banana split is supposed to be the best banana split. Supreme, the Supreme Court, that's the highest court we can go and argue and make our appeal. Actually, God is supreme. That's the Supreme Court that I have to go to a lot of times. Wisdom is supreme, Solomon says. So how does one get wisdom? James 1:5 says we should ask God for wisdom, who gives generously. We should ask God for wisdom, who gives generously. James 3:17 says the wisdom that comes from God, the wisdom that comes from heaven is pure. It's pure. It's peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy, and sincere. And I love this scripture. 2 Timothy 3:15 says, the Holy Scriptures will make you wise for salvation through faith in Christ Jesus. If you want wisdom, you need to ask God for it. Or you need to read his word, and you'll get it from there too. This gives us the best advice to live a good life, to live good lives by using God's wisdom. Here's a great example of asking God for wisdom. 1 Kings 3:1-15. Solomon, the son of David, finds himself the king of Israel at a very young age. And there had only been two kings. There was Saul and then King David. And then David dies, and it leaves Solomon to rule God's people. Solomon was very young. And it says, Solomon sought out God and asked him for wisdom. And you want to know God's reaction? God was very pleased with Solomon. He was very pleased with Solomon. Here's a young kid. He's a young kid. He finds himself in the king. In fact, Solomon says, Lord, I need wisdom to rule your people. You have so many people. They're so numerous, I can't count them all, Lord. But I need you to give me wisdom so that I can discern, so that I can govern, so that I can lead your people in the right path. Solomon understood who God was at a very young age, probably because his father did. I mean, when you're that young, you're pretty much following what your parents say. Ryan came to spend the night at my house one night. And it's the only night he ever came to spend the night with me. And I said, Ryan, do you want a Mountain Dew? He goes, well, no, because I told mom and dad I wouldn't drink them after 10 o'clock. And I said, well, it's okay. You're at my house. He goes, no, I don't want to go against my parents. And I just thought that was admirable, that he was going to listen to his parents, even though he was at my house. Now, the next morning when he got up, he says, hey, can I have that Mountain Dew now? But he followed the advice of his parents. And that's what Solomon did, basically, because he was really too young. But he had learned enough from being under his father. And so he sought out God and asked God. And God was very pleased with Solomon, because Solomon didn't ask for money. You know that's the first thing I'm telling you. I know I just said, just give me enough money, Lord, where I can take it easy for the rest of my life. Because sometimes I think like that. I'm not going to lie. I'd love to have my house paid off. I really would. But I better be asking for wisdom. And God will help me pay that house off. That's what Solomon did. He could have asked for wealth. He could have asked for prestige and honor. He could have asked for a mighty army. He could have asked for everything. He could have asked for long life. He could have asked for anything, and God was going to give it to him. But because he asked for wisdom and didn't ask for selfish needs, God gave him wealth and honor. And then he told Solomon that if you would walk in obedience and keep God's decrees and commands as his father David had, God would grant him long life. This is the God that we serve. When we go to him and ask him, and we're faithful to him, and we do what he says, he takes care of us. He blesses us. And Solomon was so wise at a young age to ask for wisdom. In 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 16 through 28, Solomon makes, I don't know if this was his first wise ruling, but he made a wise ruling. There was two women that lived together, and they each had baby boys about the same age. And both of them would sleep in the same bed with their babies right next to them. Well, one of the mothers rolled over on her son and suffocated her son to death. And she woke up and realized that her son was dead. So you know what she did? She took her baby and switched it with the other lady's living baby for her. And the next morning when the mother woke up and looked at the dead baby, she realized, that ain't my baby. Then she looks at the other lady's baby. She goes, that's my baby. So a fight broke out, right? And so they take it before the king, King Solomon. And they tell King Solomon the story. And you know what he says? Bring me an axe. Bring me a sword, whatever, I don't know. Bring it. I'm going to cut this baby in two. You know what happened? The mother who knew that was her son said, please, don't cut the baby. Let her have it. Solomon, the light bulb went off and said, give her the baby. That's the real mother. All because he had wisdom. The thing that he asked God for, And then he put it into practice. He had the knowledge of God. He had the experience of what his dad went through. And he saw what his dad went through. So he asked God for wisdom, and then God gave him that knowledge and experience that when two women came fighting over a baby, he knew what to do to get one of them to either love the baby or they both wouldn't have had no babies. But he made a wise ruling because he had wisdom. It's really powerful when you think about that. The conclusion is, if you want a great life, get wisdom, and you will be wise. Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 and 28. Jesus says, a wise man built his house upon a rock. The rain came down, the winds blew, and they beat against that house, but the house did not fall because it stood, its foundation was on the solid rock. And then he says, now a foolish man came and he built his house on the sand. The rains came down, the winds blew, and it blew that house away because it was not on solid foundation. And Jesus says, if you practice my words, you are like the wise man that built his house upon a rock. But if you reject me and don't listen to me, you're like the foolish man who built his house upon the sand. Where are you at today? Do you have your fortunes on the rock, Jesus Christ? Or are you just dependent on yourself or the evil one? Hopefully we're all on the rock of Jesus Christ. Hopefully we have that wisdom. However, sometimes as Christians, we have lapse in good sound judgment. We make mistakes. And sometimes these sins can hold us back from doing God's will. And so maybe there's someone who needs to come today and say, hey, I need forgiveness. I need the prayers of my brothers and sisters. We're all here to help each other. We're all here to be here for each other. Use your wisdom today and come. And we will help you with whatever you need. Thank you.